Assalamu alaikum. S- Uh, Today is our first lecture on the plant anatomy. In the plant anatomy, we will cover all the things related to plant anatomy like tissue system and secondary growth, wood types of woods, what kind of tissues are present in the dicot stem, dicot leaf, monocot stem, monocot leaf, and each and everything we will cover in the plant anatomy. So today is the first lecture, and we will start with the definition what is plant anatomy and what is the difference between plant anatomy and morphology. And second, we will study what kind of tissues are comes under the category of plant anatomy. So let's get started. First is plant anatomy versus morphology. So plant anatomy is the study of plant in which we study the internal organization of the plant, in which we study the internal organization. Whereas in morphology, we will study the external appearance of plant, means what type of root is present, what type of stem is present, what type of leaves are present. Means, for example, if in case of leaves, the leaves are simple or compound, whether they are pinnate and bipinnate, what kind of leaves are present. So if we study in externally, then the study is called the morphology. But if we study the plant internally at the tissue level and cell level, we will call the plant anatomy. So firstly, we will study with the tissues, what kind of tissues are present in plants. So the tissues which are present in plants are of two types. So they are divided into two categories. Number one is meristematic, and the number two is permanent. So meristematic tissues are those tissues which have the capacity to continuously divide. So they are continuously dividing cells, whereas on the other hand permanent cells does not divide because they are mature. They does not divide. Okay, so meristematic cells, on the basis of classification, they are classified into two types. Number one is, we firstly classify the meristematic tissue on the basis of their formation, and secondly we classify the meristematic tissues on the basis of their location. Later on we will see what categories comes under the formation and what categories come under the location. Now the permanent tissue are of two types. Number one is simple and number two is compound. Okay, so the simple tissue are of two types. Number one is epidermis and number two is ground tissue, or these tissues are filling tissue. The category comes under the compound are xylem and phloem. So these are called simple tissue and these are called compound tissue. Why these are called simple tissue and why these are called compound tissue? Because the simple tissue are made up of only one kind of cells. okay, and they perform only one function, means one type of cell with one function. Whereas on the other hand, compound tissue are made up of more than one type of cells, and they perform as a whole one function. Like if we uh, for example, in ground tissue are of three types: parenchyma, number two is collenchyma, and number three is sclerenchyma. Okay, so all these tissues, parenchyma tissue, collenchyma tissue, and sclerenchyma tissue, all these are just made up of one kind of cells, means these are parenchymatous cells, these are collenchymatous cells, and these are sclerenchymatous cells, and they perform specific function, means parenchymatous cells perform the function of secretion, storage, collenchyma cells for support, sclerenchyma cells also for support. Whereas xylem is made up of three kinds of cells, means tracheids or vessels, number two fibers, and number three parenchyma cells. So all these three kind of cells as a whole perform the function of water conduction. Similarly, phloem, they are made up of sieve cells or sieve tube, phloem fiber, and phloem parenchyma. So all these three types of cells as a whole perform the function of food conduction. So phloem is responsible for conduction of food, xylem is responsible for conduction of water. When all these three cells work together and responsible for the conduction of water. Okay, so in this lecture we has covered what is differentiation between plant anatomy and plant morphology. In plant anatomy, we study the internal organization at cell level and tissue level, whereas in the morphology, we study the plant externally. Tissue is group of cells. So tissue, there are two types of tissue: meristematic tissue and second is permanent tissue. Meristematic tissues are continuously dividing cells, whereas permanent tissues do not divide continuously because they are permanent. And meristematic tissue are further categorized into two types on the basis of their formation and on the basis of their location, whereas permanent cells are of two types: simple and compound. Simple tissues are those which are made up of only one type of cells and perform a specific function, whereas compound tissues are made up of more than one type of cells and as a whole perform the one function. The tissue comes under the category of simple are epidermis and ground. And the ground tissue we have parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, whereas compound tissue have xylem and phloem. So next time we will cover the meristematic and permanent tissue.